that you have interacted with right from 0 years up to the stage that you are in right now in your different capacities, you wouldn't be where you are. I personally wouldn't be here if it was not for literacy. I am Priscilla Regina Dalwoga, and welcome to our talk show that's going to be focusing on literacy. This is in relation with the International Literacy Day, and the one in focal is the 2024 celebrations. Now, literacy is a fundamental human right for you and for me and the entire world. It opens up the doors to the enjoyment of other human rights, greater freedoms, as well as global citizenship. Since 1967, upon the declaration by UNESCO, the annual celebrations of the International Literacy Day have taken space on the 8th of September around the world, reminding policy makers on the national level and international level, practitioners and the public of the critical importance of literacy for creating more literature, just and peacefulness, as well as creating sustainability amongst our different societies. Now, Uganda in particular is joining the rest of the world to mark these celebrations and this year's International Literacy Day through a belated event that will be held on the 12th of September 2024 under a symposium modality. Now, this will be preceded by a series of activities that will predominantly be spearheaded by civil society organization in the literacy fraternity and a post-International Literacy Day event on the 26th of September 2024 ahead of that celebration, which will be held at Makerere University. When you look at the global theme, by and large as advanced by UNESCO, the global theme for 2024 is promoting multilingual education. This is focusing on literacy for mutual understanding and peace. But when you give it the Ugandan context, the national theme for us here in Uganda is around promoting multilingual education and literacy for cohesion, as well as socio-economic transformation. The 2024 theme serves as a powerful reminder of the crucial role literacy plays in fostering a more just, peaceful, as well as sustainable society. It's upon this background that we bring you this talk show, and the hashtag is ILD24 for you to engage with us. Across the social media platforms, we're going to be having comments from our panelists posted, but we are streaming live on our website, which is www.ntv.co.ug, as well as our live stream, the link that you can access through our X account, NTV Uganda, to lead you to our NTV Uganda YouTube channel to be able to have this conversation live as you move about the day of activities. In studio with me, I am joined by the Senior Projects Coordinator, UNESCO Project Office here in Uganda. I equally have the Senior Communications Officer from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, and we're also joined by the Program Officer for the Youth After School Initiative, also known as YASI. These gentlemen are going to do the due diligence in reminding us as a country what are our commitments, efforts in order to maintain literacy levels and improve them, especially in light of the fact that there's been advancements such as technology. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen, and I'm going to allow salutations starting with my immediate left.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, the viewer here who is listening to us this afternoon. My name is Charles Drechabo, is introduced. I'm Senior Programs Officer at UNESCO Project Office here in Uganda, Kampala. And it's my privilege to be here today in this studio representing UNESCO and the UN on this occasion of marking the International Literacy Day. And for UNESCO specifically, this is very important and significant in a sense that since 1967, as it was mentioned, UNESCO declared 8th September every year as International Literacy Day. And in that sense, International Literacy Day is a call to the public, to the, to the policymakers, to the decision makers, to the civil society organization to highlight the significance and the importance of literacy. Literacy is defined as the ability to read and to write, especially for the lower level children, but also for the adults. So I'm very happy and privileged to be here in studio to talk about this very important topic.
You're most welcome. And next to him we do have from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, but this is government by and large being well represented in this discussion.
Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Joshua Chalimpa from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. I want to thank the viewers out there who are following us, both on the TV and also on the social media platforms. The Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development is so much interested in this idea, in this topic, because we are responsible for the literacy of all Ugandans, especially in the non-formal education system. Because we know that government has come up with different programs such as UPE, USE and others, but there is a section of Ugandans who may not benefit from those systems, programs already in place. That's why literacy is very important, and as the country grows, it increasingly becomes harder for those who don't have literacy skills, or for lack of a better word, I don't want to call them illiterate, but it becomes harder because increasingly you see those who have traveled. You go to an airport, you have a self-check-in port. It means that you have to check in yourself on the flight. Now you go to a petrol station, you have to fuel your car. You need some form of literacy, and that is coming here in Uganda, so it is increasingly becoming harder, and therefore that's why government should take interest, and that's why the Ministry of Gender gives this priority.
Okay, all right. We also do have Mwalimu Chionga joining us. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to our viewers. My name is Chigonya Elias Mwanawani from Youth After School Initiative. We do a lot of work in the civil society, working on the young people. Youth After School is an NGO, has offices across the country working on the young people. But basically what? We are focused at the young people in school, out of school, adolescent girls, young women, the youth refugees, and all the youth in the different fraternity. But our major focus is empowerment of these young people to see that they are able to read and write, tap resources, opportunities that can help them live a fulfilling life in their endeavors. For this International Literacy Day, allow me to share just a light at this introduction that literacy, away from reading and writing, it has to impact and bring out the resource called knowledge. And that knowledge is what in these voices we need to see the impact, the translation. So briefly, this is just a poem, part of the literacy work, which I want to share briefly. It's called The Language of Knowledge, International Literacy Day 2024. Education claiming highest consumption vote on domestic and national budget. Knowledge poised as a consumable commodity for every family. Fees and outcry on lips of learners and education institutions. Parents haunted by education and training. The voice of knowledge must be at a heightened pitch, translating into al-haq, truth, in action of every human resource, justice and its essence in judgment of social affairs, benefit and its outcomes where learned fellows manifest, purity in practice and service of human obligations, beauty of creation in service of humanity, and above all, free from deception and corruption. My fellows in the learning class, language of knowledge must create a peaceful coexistence for humanity in diversity, sustainable livelihood for the weak and the strong, a culture of morality, ethics, and values for human dignity, awareness of man's transitory nature as set by his maker and provider in trajectory of life. Our dear comrades, the language of knowledge must enable me and you to appreciate our differences in diversity, unit of purpose, collective responsibility over the environment and the planet in its entirety, leaving no one behind in the prosperity of our society. For God and my country, Elias Chigonya, Mwanawani, Program Officer, Youth After School.
All right, leaving no one behind. So let's not leave our audience behind. Some of you may be asking yourself, what is literacy in the first place? Well, by dictionary definition, it's concerned with the writing, the study or content of literature, especially the kind valued for quality of form. And we do have the expressions of literacy in the forms of written, such as one that has been written and read to us, poetic in nature, artistic, dramatic, published and printed. Those are the different forms of literacy that we get to interact with on a daily basis in order to promote multilingual education across the bar. Now, the objectives of this discussion, we hope that at the end of the day we are going to be promoting the literacy as a fundamental right for you and for me, or even reminding some people that it is a fundamental right. It is our society's fundamental right. It is our children's future. If it's going to be a future that is productive, then literacy should be embedded in there. We also hope to highlight to you literacy challenges, but also encourage policy development that is future forward. We have looked at the education sector by and large, and it's still backward with a few edits of curriculums in the lower secondary. It's showing us that we need to look into the future while we are planning on policy level, but also foster long-term learning and celebrating the progress that we have made so far. Speaking of which, I will turn to UNESCO first and understand from the global perspective, what is our literacy rate since the inception of this particular day?
Yes, thank you very much for this, and once again, thank you very much for the viewer who is following us through today. Globally speaking, right now, the statistics show 1 out of every 7 children, especially between the age of 15 or above the age of 15, cannot read and write. And now what that means is that we have, for every 7 children, at least 1 cannot read and write. This is global statistics. And I want to believe that the scenario is, or probably is, much worse, especially in developing countries. And the recent statistics show that in the developing countries alone, at least 3 out of 4 below the age of 10 cannot be able to articulate and comprehend basic reading text. So this is the picture in which we are speaking today. Now, when you go by that, with the statistics aside, we need to try to understand why we are so much concerned about literacy today. As you rightly put, and as the colleagues have alluded to, literacy in the context of UNESCO is not just merely a matter of knowing how to read and write. It's a fundamental human right. It's a fundamental human right because it presupposes that once you are illiterate, you are able to read and write, then you are able to communicate easily. You are able to cut across different countries because this is a global village. We are moving from one country to another, virtually or physically. So everything that's done requires actually today that you must have ability to read and write. Because if you do have that, then you'll be able to connect with the people. When you are able to connect with the people, that means you'll be able to coexist, appreciate the various cultures of the people, because you can be able to speak their language. I think Nelson Mandela put it much better. He said that when you speak to a man in a language that he understands, he will respect you and listen to you very well. But if you speak to a man in his own language, then you speak to his heart.
This theme is for 2024 is pushing for multilingual education. What have been the gaps in the present for expressions of education towards literacy?
You see, as the society advances, you will realize that the number of people who speak more than one language is decreasing globally. And looking at even our current context and the situation in the country, in Uganda alone, you will find that majority of the children, especially in urban areas, are only able to speak one language. Because there's a drive towards expressing ourselves in English, for instance. So a child who is taken to school starts learning in English. And most of these children actually do not even know their mother language. So what that means is that they are only able to speak one language. So when they get out of this situation and move to the next destination where they are supposed to speak or express themselves in other languages, it becomes increasingly difficult. And yes, the studies have shown that for 40% of the children, you know, who are able to speak in more than one language, especially those who are able to start learning in their own language, are able to comprehend, to read, and to write better than those who only start in one language.
Okay.
So this is giving us some kind of challenge situation as we're existing now, especially as we're advancing with the technology, as the world is opening, as artificial intelligence sets in, we're all looking at a situation where we want to connect with the language. So because of that, you realize that we are actually losing our mother tongue, this intangible cultural situation that we need to address. Now, when you lose your mother tongue, you run a risk that at one time you will find a whole population speaking only one language. So now when a whole population speaks one language, that means you are actually moving towards extinction. So as UNESCO, we value multilingual dimension to ensure that every person has opportunity to know more than one language in order to connect better.
Mr. Chalimpa, this is an interesting one for you because now on a national level and from the government side, what has been mentioned here, first of all, the study by UNESCO that indicates that of every 7 children, at least 1 cannot read and write. That alone is a challenge, and the study showing that the local or the less developed a country is, the higher those statistics. We would like you to speak into the current statistics as far as literacy rating is concerned on a national level. He has also mentioned something that I find quite peculiar now as an adult, because going to school, it was kind of an abomination to speak your local language. It was disregarded. When you go to school and speak your vernacular, you might get a cane on your behind for speaking your local language, which was an indirect telling to the next society, those children, that it is wrong for you to speak your own language. It is wrong for you to learn in your own language, to express yourself in your own language. And then comes the multilingual education factor that is being pushed by this literacy death theme. It begs the question, it looks like we are at loggerheads, Mr. Chalimpa.
Thank you very much. Of course, the situation is not very different based on the figures that he gave. The Uganda Bureau of Statistics gives the figures that out of the total population of Uganda, at least 74% can read and write. It means that there is a big percentage of Ugandans. That's about 26%. In figures, that's about 10 million Ugandans who cannot read and write. And this is a very big figure. The challenge of that is that because they cannot read and write, it means that they cannot benefit from even the government programs that we're talking about. There are programs on wealth creation. There are programs like PDM. There are programs like Myoga. There are programs in the Ministry of Gender like WEP, YLP. Now, these people, because of their challenges of education, may not be in position to fill even simple forms of access to those programs. Of course, the Ministry of Gender has taken interest in this. We have had programs, successive programs. We had the Functional Adult Literacy Program, where many of Ugandans who are left out of the formal education system were given opportunity to at least learn how to read and write. The ministry now has a new program which learns from the successes of the Functional Adult Literacy Program, which is called the ICOLEO, Integrated Community Learning for Wealth Creation. Now, that program takes advantage of the infrastructure which is in place. At the community level, we used to have the community centers at the parish level, and these have to be empowered such that now people can learn basic skills at their level. So, of course, the fact that a big population, which is 10 million, by the way, there are some countries which the total population is even less than 10 million. We are talking about so many people, and this is despite the fact that there are programs in Uganda like UPE, there are programs like USE, and some other programs that have been put in place by government. Despite the existence of those programs, there are still a substantial number who, for some reason, will not be able to go to school to benefit from UPE, and this should be the source of concern for Ugandans.
Okay, all right. Mwalimu, in this regard, it begs the question, because you actually do the groundwork, you engage with the young people on a daily, and what have been your findings ever since the inception of ERC? What was the problem, and what have been the solutions that you have been able to bring to board in terms of helping a population become more literate?
Thank you. Basically, at Youth After School, one of the critical gaps that we saw, that most of the parents were reluctant to push the learners go to school because of the poverty, the low incomes, and our major work has been to create dialogues, talk to them, encourage, inspire, and we are doing one very instrumental work. We have gathered opportunities from education institutions. The students who have given scholarships from primary, secondary, through our network across. Well, we thank those schools, we thank the universities like USBAT, we give scholarships for us, we're in good terms, we do career guidance, and inspire, and even send the message in the youth that those boys of yours are the future generations, the young ones. So can we play a continuous role? So number one, the gap among the parents, because they need these youth as community labor. Then we say, no, please, there are more opportunities. And to that, we have seen people who didn't have hope. We have one of our communication manager at ERC, he's on a scholarship from the circles of our partners. And he's doing a very great work to the organization and to the entire community. So we really need to have more, and I like the idea of gender, of the integrated community learning for wealth creation. This is where we need to partner up. And I want to remind our audience that literacy in our communities, traditionally, we had the bioto, the fire gathering. As the ministry, part of these are the local, away from only encouraging learners to be on cartoon, but these are areas where we need to encourage the local community to have the community dialogue. Because now I've been with the youth in Chiliandongo. I'm now bringing the element of multilingual. In Chiliandongo, we have Ethiopians, we have Congolese, we have South Sudanese, we have the Arab Sudanese and above. And it is very unfortunate. The number of refugees in Uganda is increasing, but how are they going to communicate? They must communicate when we help them provide platforms where they can learn the language. For example, now the Sudanese, those that come from the Republic of Sudan, hardly find it how to put a path forward, because 100% or 99% speak Arabic. And now they don't know English, they don't know Luganda. So we really need to put up, especially in these refugee centers, because that is the center of the multilingual, where we really need to have literacy labs to help them learn for social integration. Then we need to put up away from the literacy labs, the ICT for global opportunities. A refugee is tied there. But if these facilities are put down, he can do online work. And so really, those are big problems there, the refugee issue, the parents, but the integrated framework is a collective effort you and me should put forward to ensure that such ground problems are clearly solved.
All right, Mr. Chigonya's submissions open my mind to how developed countries have managed the literacy issue. For example, if I was a Ugandan who is wanting to acquire education in China and their predominant learning language is Chinese, I get to have 1 year of learning the language, the local language, so that I can be able to then acquire the education. So I've actually gotten 2 degrees or 2 masters in language literacy, and as well as the actual thing that took me there. And how we can be able to integrate that for marginalized groups such as the refugees that have been talked about. I think that's something government you can speak into.
I want to associate myself with the submission of others before me, especially on the issue of multilingual, because in Uganda, apart from the refugees that he's talking about, there are also minority communities. And the Ministry of Gender takes interest in those minority communities. Communities such as the Benet, the Batwa, whose language is at the verge of extinction. And the ministry would want the preservation of those languages. And we do documentation of those languages. Some of them, for some reason, because of migration, they are no longer living in their indigenous communities. And because of those migrations to different areas where they speak other languages, we find that their languages will be at the verge of extinction. The ministry also gave support to the submissions with the Ministry of Education, especially on the idea of this curriculum which encourages teaching in the mother tongue. I know there was a lot of debate about it, because people of this generation want to believe that for somebody to be regarded intelligent, they must speak the English very well.
Let me correct there. Not that they want to believe, neither that we want to believe. Believe me, when we hear the French speaking, or even our own local dialect, when we hear our grandparents speaking, we want to hear, we want to understand what they're speaking. But again, because of that era whereby it was made to look like an abomination for you to speak your mother tongue when we were acquiring formal education, that is the mindset that was introduced to us.
So what the ministry does, one, is to sensitize communities. We do a lot of sensitization to teach people to love their language. Because you have a situation where, for example, if because of your accent, people want to believe that maybe you started from a poor school, you have to speak English like the Englishman. And that is dangerous, because if we hate our language, it's like hating our own selves. And as a result, there is a lot of knowledge that can be lost, and there is a lot that we can get from the indigenous knowledge, which is preserved through the language. So once we drop our languages, and I'm happy that the Ministry of Education also knows that this is important, and it's encouraged, and it has been put in the programs of government. How I wish that this can be implemented, because it is one thing to have it on paper and another thing to implement it. And we have to continue with our campaign, especially with the parents, to understand that knowing their language is as important as knowing the English language or any other international language.
All right, we clearly have a lot of work before us in the different capacities.
Can I just say something in relation to that? You've raised a question about why in the formal learning we are compelled to speak in English, or to learn in English for that case. And I can say that actually this scenario evolved over a period of time. The generation that, my generation that studied, especially in rural areas, it was very clear from primary 1 to primary 3, you study in a local language. They teach you all the literacy, how to read and write in the local language. It's only when you reach primary 4 is when they start introducing you to English. And when they introduce to English, they expect you that now you will advance, but you will have already have the foundational languages. I think over the years, because of the dynamics of movement of population from the rural areas to urban areas, the situation started changing. because you leave your rural area and you come into the city, and in the city you cannot be able to retain your local language, because your local language is not the dominant language in the city. And unfortunately for Uganda, we do not have a national local language like our colleagues in the other parts of East Africa. Kiswahili becomes the first language that everybody has to speak. Now, because somebody has moved from another city or from another district, is in Kampala, that means the best mode of communication will be English. So I think we need to revisit that. We need to revisit that in terms of how to structure our curriculum to ensure that the thematic curriculum that was introduced, where the children should learn in the first language, should be enforced or implemented. And secondly, we need to really, as a country, to put into practice the decision by the government to introduce an indigenous language. Kiswahili, I think that's the official language, so that Ugandans other than English will have Kiswahili or that language that has been agreed on.
But that is in support of region integration. But now national integration will then be challenged. Then Ugandans, you'll be saying to Ugandans and the indigenous and nature that theirs is not strong enough to also be able to compete nationally, especially.
Yeah, but fundamentally, the first thing is not to look at language as only a means of communication. It's a transmission of values and the principles in our community. So I dare say that for us, for the families, for the parents, the first call on us is to ensure that our children speak our own mother tongue. That's the beginning point.
All right, Mwalimu has something to add to this.
Well, we could ask ourselves, who is the driver of the local language?
Yeah.
What is the role of the parent? You and all of us here and those in the audience out there who are parents, how much of the local language do you use? What is its content? I gave you a poem in English. But because I'm an advocate of literacy and the local literacy, I have versions of the local language. For instance, if you don't build your individual ability to love your language, to practice your language, then you will bury the language. So take this message. Gwe no muzadde, atawadde kadde, oyo gwozadde owedde. Kubanga tajja kuwa kadde ako kewamumma mu budde mukadde ke kadde owo obudde ekyo ekinakugasa mu bukadde oba mu bulwadde bw'obanga okakasa nti owedde tokiwa budde owulidde nze nkitadde.
All right, Mwalimu, translated as make sure that as a parent especially, your role and responsibility towards your children, aiding them in picking up on these indigenous elements such as language to be able to have multilingual education, which is the foundation of our discussion. Standing to you, in regards to the modern elements, what are the 21st century modern elements of literacy that we do have?
Well, I think currently the trend that's moving in terms of literacy, of course, globally the society is opening towards internet-based communication, towards artificial intelligence, towards multimedia communication. These are the modern trends of the communication that are displayed and that are hitting on the face of the people. But as UNESCO, we also recognize that as we are advancing with those technologies, as we are advancing on those aspects of modern methods of literacy, either through artificial intelligence or through internet-based communication, through radio communication, we cannot lose sight of the fact that fundamentally, and to begin with, for you to have literate society, you must be able to communicate in your mother tongue, in your own dialect. It's an expression, it's a cultural expression, it's a continuity of the society that would like to progress. So whereas the world trend is changing, that's why probably you mentioned rightly that when you go to China and you want to study, they will first subject you to learn the language. Otherwise they will have taught you that in English. You see that? So they will have taught you. Why do they insist on you? So we should step behind as a country and look and say, it does not mean that you cannot learn technology in the local language. You can actually learn technology in the local language. So our preparedness should be, how can we reform the curriculum in such a way that even in our local language we are able to break down, we are able to understand, we are able to complement the dynamics of the complex society in which we are living in. If the technology is developing, what does that mean? So I'm happy that the government is implementing at the lower secondary level a curriculum, a modern curriculum that is competence-based. That's looking at the competences instead of looking at just transferring the knowledge. So with that, I expect that it will come the element of trying to transmit the modern techniques of language. But that said, in my own observation, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the system now is that we actually have very few teachers who are qualified to provide foundational literacy for children. Those teachers that you need to hear about in some areas in the communities, they will even give them the name as vernacular teachers. That was the connotation. It didn't mean that they were really local, but they were trained with the competence and skills for you to form the foundation of learning to read and write.
And today they don't have jobs because of...
Yes, because we're looking at the society advancing, and there we try to relegate them. Or the system has not continued to train them. So we have teachers who probably will be able to read and transmit the knowledge to the children, but we have few of them who can form the foundational literacy and even numeracy at the lower level. So don't be surprised, you can go into a school, in a class, and you find the teaching is taking place. The child is in class from primary 1 up to primary 5, but the child cannot still read. That's a problem. That should not happen. By the time a child reaches primary 3, the child should have a certain level to read and write in whatever language that child is. So that's the fundamental. So when now bring the multilingual, then it makes it even more complex. So you're having a child who is only trained in English, for instance, and he reaches P5 and cannot still read. Can read in English and cannot even read in the local dialect. So that is the dynamics, that's the complexity in which we find ourselves. And I think it is a call now that in this theme that we're focusing on, let's try to look at how do we break this? How do we make sure that we have a society that's multilingual, but multilingual built on the values and the principles of our culture, and then we have a system that should be able to provide foundational skills in learning to read and write.
Okay, Mr. Chalimpa, let's look at government in terms of policies, regulations, or programs, efforts, as well as overall reforms that are supporting pro-multilingual education.
First of all, to say that all is not lost. I know we've spoken about the challenges that we face as a country, but the founding blocks are there. For example, we have the thematic curriculum. He is talking about the absence of the teachers to fit into the curriculum or to be able to appreciate the language and speak it. That's a challenge, but the fact that we have the foundation, which is the curriculum itself, means that government should be addressing the challenge of the lack of teachers. Now, the other ones are issues to do with the mindset. I'm happy that the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development heads the community mobilization and mindset change. Some of these issues are about a mindset, which right from the parents themselves. I normally, during the election year, during swearing in, I see TVs with video clips of councillors or members of parliament struggling to swear in the English language. And you see that even the media itself is obsessed with the thinking that if you can't articulate English, therefore it means that you cannot understand. And yet even in the local councils, they allow people to speak in their language. Unless that is embedded within our laws, that people can, in the local councils, can debate in the local language. I think once we deal with the issue of mindset, that people appreciate that our language is also as important, because the Chinese have been able to advance technologically. They have gone to the moon, they have satellites in space, but they speak their Chinese language. Equally, the Germans, the French. What makes us believe or think that for us we cannot advance, that knowing your language means that therefore you are mediocre, therefore you don't know anything. Once now the ministry rolls out this and we talk to the country, we address the people, we talk to the parents. I know that even parents speak to their children in the English language. They want to teach them as if they have taken it upon themselves to teach their children the English language, to show that now that shows class. Now, that is where the challenge is. It is good that we are waking up a bit early. We don't have, at least, there are languages which were at the verge of extinction. I talked about like for example, if you look at the minority communities like the Benet, the Batwa, people like that. But now that we are learning, we have learned that this is important thanks to the different partners like UNESCO, who are coming up with programs to support countries like Uganda. I think we can salvage something. It's not too late.
Okay. All right, Mwalimu, this one is an interesting one. What are the challenges you have faced that you think will make it difficult to level the ground as far as multilingual education is concerned?
Yeah. One is classism. Classism, young people feel that, no, I'm not of that class, okay? So unless, as I have said, we work on the mindset. Then two, motivation for the local languages and the multiple languages. Me, why I have the talent and skill I have is because I was inspired. I was inspired by Kaimbira drama actors. They could paint it in the best way. Okay, so can we put up through the ministry and partners motivation grounds for the community and the young people to appreciate our indigenous language and then appreciation of other culture? For example, if someone knows your language and is a Somali or is from Sudan, easier to marry and you can accommodate Yemuko. So, but those, the forces of motivation, classism, and again ignorance. Yeah, because I'll give you then another line from the Quran and Sunnah perspective, that the foundation of the Quran begins with Iqra. Iqra is reading. So, and in the other sense, it tells us that whoever is entrusted to serve, the inner challenge in you is on two pillars. إِنَّهُ كَانَ ظَلُومًا جَهُولًا. That the presence of dhulum, that is corruption, in us, and then jahal, failure to know, ignorance, those are the foundations that keep us far from the multilingual integration. You will find the foundations there that he has created us into cultures and nations for purpose of knowing each other. So can we get the motivation from the spiritual ground? Can we get the motivation from the universal benefit that exists in diversity? So even for us who promote this, we need to dig deep and find those roots.
All right, Mr. Chalimpa, how is the country by and large observing the International Literacy Day 2024?
Thank you very much. There are a number of real activities that have been organized. Some of them have been going on with the different partners. The Ministry of Gender works with different partners across the country in the space of literacy. such as Yasi, who is here. And one of the things that we are doing, and that is very important, is also to reach out, to communicate. And we are happy that NTV has given us this space to talk to the nation and sensitize them about this. We will have a symposium that will be hosted at the Prime Minister's office in the Presidential Auditorium. There are a number of discussants there. There are a number of activities that are going to take place. And we would want to invite everybody, all stakeholders, and the public at large to participate in this symposium.
All right. UNESCO, I know in this regard, as an implementing partner, has also been able to come up with an itinerary of how to better celebrate International Literacy Day 2024. What are some of those plans?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, today, 10th of September, the world is convening and to celebrate the International Literacy Day in Cameroon, Yaoundé, and along that theme. And so prior to that and after that, it's expected that the member states like Uganda will be able to pick up some of the elements to be able to continuously engage with the communities. So as UNESCO, of course, there's official statement that comes out to the member states, clearly advocating for multilingual, languages, literacy in education as a right, as a human right that needs to be placed on. But otherwise, the theme and the focus is today in Yaoundé, which is in Africa, because it was realized that Africa is the least in terms of literacy when it comes to multilingual languages. So that's where the focus is.
Okay, all right. As we come to the close of this discussion, the national theme being promoting multilingual education and literacy for socio-economic transformation. In your different capacities, what's your call to action and commitment towards implementing? Because that's where the challenge is, in implementing some of these commitments. I'll start with Molimo.
Thank you very much. Number one, call to action. Can we support we have local structures like the family library. How many of us here have a family library for the people to pick and read? Then number two, can we have the fire circles for traditional? They need to be sponsored because those are part of areas that support literacy. Then three, in our family gatherings, can we try to encourage our local languages? Because that is our family. Clan meetings and the like. So the line of development. Then can we also have this language more celebrated? Or we have competitions for the young people. This is what paints these activities in the hearts of the people. NTV can host us here and we have the local language grammar debate, and this is what can really inspire and keep such language in shape. And finally, as we embrace ICT, can you have some messages in Laganda, not only in English? What is tagline? Can you also tag some other? Can we develop groups of thinkers that can advance the language, which we are trying to put at the youth after school? Okay,
all right. Mr. Chalimpa, on behalf of government.
Thank you very much. First of all, the first thing is that we need to love our culture because language is part of the culture. And I know that just recently there was the Karamoja festival that was taking place in Karenga. The president was there, the Karabjungs were there expressing their culture. Now, also the family is key at this. I'm glad that all that I'm talking about falls within the realm of the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. The issue of culture, the issues of the family, and also going back to the roots, not forgetting where we've come from. He talked about the issue of Ebioto. In the Aluo language, they call the Wang-O, whereby people gather at the fireplace to listen to stories. It is through those reinventing what we are trying to lose, what we have been losing, that will now be able to know the language and also the stories and also preserve the cultures. Of course, the government, the role of the mandate of government is to put in place policies that support that whatever we are talking about. Some of these policies exist, at least on paper. Now we need to roll them out in the communities so that they can be workable.
All right, Mr. Drachaba.
Yes, thank you very much. I think my call to action is at different levels. To the ministry, especially the Ministry of Education and Sports, I think we need to put into action the curriculum that is going to allow our young people to be able not only to know how to read and write, but also to know how to read and write in another language. So the second or third language. So when we talk about multilingual, of course, we are looking at first your first language, what we call the mother tongue, that needs to be promoted. But secondly, we should also go further and ensure that additional languages that are not necessarily our mother tongue should be prioritized, because the world is opening up. So people are traveling, they need to go to China, they need to go to Germany, and so on. So beyond English, we need to introduce those other languages so that the world can be open for our young people to be able to move out, to be able to communicate, so that if you go to China, you are able to trade, you are able to learn properly. So that should be embedded within the curriculum that we are going to develop. But to our community, and especially the families, I think we need to deliberately take effort to ensure that we promote and we transmit our local languages, you know, as one of the starting point. We should not demonize. We should not say our languages are not good, because there's a value that is there that you transmit. There are certain expressions that you cannot find them in another language. There are the taboos that you communicate. There are cultures that you transmit. You can only do that best in your own local language. So as a community, as a family, we should take pride in that and to make sure that that goes out. So I think for the media and the entire communication channel, we need to increasingly adopt a situation where when we're communicating, we provide opportunity for that to reach to everybody. Not everybody will be expected to understand English, for instance. So the design and architect of our communication should be broadened up.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your efforts, first of all, and your continued support towards having multilingual education at the center of literacy in the 21st century that is in the face of artificial intelligence and technology, all which are meant to aid and act as tools in supporting people to be able to communicate, to interact and integrate as far as literacy is concerned. That brings us to the end of this conversation. It's been powered by UNESCO, and I am Priscilla Regina Daluga. Good afternoon.